Hello and welcome to Bad Community Advice. This show is all about terrible tips and toxic takeaways. And today we are going to talk about what to do about lurkers in your community. I'm Seth Resler. I'm your host. I am the founder of Community Marketing Revolution. And my guest today has spent her entire career working in and on communities of all sizes, in all industries, and of all types. She describes herself as a quirky techie, as well as a data nerd. I want to welcome the senior manager of community at Calendly, a company who I use their product all the time. I love it. I am a customer, so I'm so excited to have her here. Jillian Bejtlich, welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you on.
Thank you. Super happy to be here. Thank you.
So before we get to your bad advice, and I love this bad advice because it's intuitive. It's the type of thing that people would believe and go, oh yeah, I should do that. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about the community that you manage at Calendly. And for anybody who doesn't know, just briefly describe what Calendly is as a product and a service.
Yeah, absolutely. The way I always love to explain it is, you know how sometimes you have those emails going back and forth where it's the, hey, can you meet on Tuesday? What time are you free? And blah, 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 and you go back and forth, back and forth. And by the time you get that email chain done, it's Wednesday. The meeting time that you picked is null and void. Calendly takes away that back and forth. You basically can share a link for a specific event. You can set the calendar availability on both sides. You pick the time that you need and everything gets set up for you. And it's pretty magical, honestly. It really, I think it's a redefining calendar etiquette, and it's kind of like that really nice digital handshake. So it's a cool product, and I used it before I joined the company. I still use it, and I can't imagine ever not using it.
Yeah. I think you're right when you say that it is redefining calendar etiquette, because I remember, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago at this point, when people would first send me a calendar link and I would be like, this is weird. And now I use it all the time. In fact, we scheduled this interview here using Calendly. So
we did. Yes, I was very happy to see that.
So let's talk about the community in Calendly. And I always like people to describe their community in two ways. What is the shared mission of all of your community members, the people who are participating? Why are they there? But also, what is the business purpose? What does Calendly get out of hosting a community?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking member value, org value, and shared value there. So member value. So first off, Calendly is an incredibly horizontal product. I always love to tell people, back when we first started community, I had this gentleman come in one day, and he was a farmer, I think in Denmark, I want to say, and he had 14 llamas that you could book hikes with. And he wanted to figure out how to use Calendly to book hikes with llamas. And then the same month, we had someone come in who managed one of our enterprise accounts, and they wanted to know how to basically set up, this massive demo situation. And Calendly community effectively allows people to get the type of knowledge, support, inspiration, ideation, all sorts of things that they need on their terms. And I think it's really cool because it's not around one persona or, one niche. It really tries to fit it for absolutely everyone. On the organizational side, fortunately, we're very much aligned. We want to provide, we want to provide help. We want to provide inspiration. And we also want to be able to extend the type of information people can find, because the reality is, at the end of the day, we're never going to write Calendly for farmers. Like, that piece of content is never going to happen. And that's okay, because community is helping fill that niche, and it's kind of digging into that specific content. So when you finally get to the end of it, that shared value, like that middle ground, is that we want to help more customers more effectively, more scalably, more sustainably, and customers want to be able to find more content that they can relate to. So that's where I hang out.
Nice. Where does community sit in the org chart at Calendly?
Like most communities, we sit somewhere, but I wouldn't say that that's like, how do I word this? You have to sit in a function. Like, that's just the nature of working in a corporate environment. So right now we sit within the GTM organization under the customer experience function. It's a good place for us. However, I was kind of caveat that with saying that we work with everyone pretty much on a daily basis. The only people I generally am not working with are going to be our finance folks, and if I can avoid it, HR. Pretty much everyone else in the company is someone that we work with on a daily basis. So we kind of don't have um, bounds or walls around us. We sit in the CX, but we work with absolutely everyone.
Yeah. Uh, so what does measurement look like? I mean, how are you measuring your success?
A lot of different ways. So it's important to say that Calendly community is very much a knowledge of, or a community of knowledge and support and passive ideation. Because of that and the type of community that we run and the type of goals that we have, we're very focused on consumption of knowledge and basically how large our audience is. So for us specifically, we're looking at things like unique visitors, we're looking at page views, and then more recently, because of how much AI is starting to pull our information into curated answers, we're also trying to understand what is the depth, the breadth, and kind of like the audience that might be engaging with AI generated answers outside of our domain. I think it's important to mention all this because a lot of times, I'm talking about community, people say, but what about membership? What about engagement numbers? And the reality is that when you run a support community, those aren't as important because we're trying to create a knowledge base, not so much something where people are coming in and always asking a new question.
Got it. So that raises a question for me. When you're running a support community, how much are you concerned about the connections between your members? I mean, are you looking for them to build lasting relationships, or is this really just about people being able to get in and get the answers they need?
Because it's a support community, we're not so worried about relationships. It's kind of a weird space to be in because a lot of times, you have people who are like, well, what about the relationships? What about the, people coming back over and over? And for some products, that is absolutely a thing that's necessary and it's important. I mean, to kind of give you a goofy example, so in my personal life, I'm into mountain biking, I'm into photography, I'm into wine, I have a Toyota 4Runner. And I mention these things because these are products that there are communities around where we continue to engage. We do build relationships up with people because it's a shared interest. It's a hobby. It's more of a community of practice. Like I had a conversation the other day with someone about wanting to upgrade my headlights and my taillights on my 4Runner, and a conversation with someone else about like the best Cabernet Sauvignon from Paso Robles. Those are different, but where with Calendly, like products like Calendly, they tend to be a bit more of a set it and forget it if everything is going well. And so therefore, we're not as focused on people coming back and building those relationships because it's just not the nature of the product. Whereas if I was, let's say, Fujifilm, which is the camera that I have, I do want people coming back because I want them talking about, film recipes, and I want them talking about lenses, and I want them to continue to engage and kind of grow their awareness and their knowledge so that they buy more products and they continue to buy our products.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And the way you describe it, I mean, look, Calendly is easy to use, right? I mean, it is kind of
Yep.
like you said, set it and forget it, as opposed to, I think about, I'm in a community for Ecamm Live, which is this, video streaming software that I'm using
Yeah.
to record this. And it is much more of an ongoing,
Yep.
project, to continually improve. It's like you said, it's a community of practice. So,
Yep.
with that said, is there an in-person component to what you do or not because of the type of community that you are? I mean, is there a Calendly conference where all Calendly users get together or anything like that?
Not yet. I'd love for there to be something like that someday. I do think there is an opportunity, especially since I think there are so many people who do have knowledge they don't realize could be shared on a more relationship based type of experience. I will say some of the communities I have worked with have had that in-person part to it. So, for instance, I started my career at Autodesk. And at Autodesk, we had this massive conference every November called Autodesk University. And there was absolutely an in-person component to that. Like that was where we got our advocates together. And then even recently, I was actually just at Gainsight Pulse, which is the conference for Gainsight, logically. And there's a massive component of the community members getting together there and actually even getting their advocates together, which is kind of cool because that's what that big jacket in the background is. I'm one of their advocates.
Nice. I love that. All right. So let's take a look at your bad advice. And I love this bad advice. You said build for engagement and active users, ignore lurkers. Talk to me about this because this is something that makes sense. I mean, in a lot of ways, this sounds like the 80-20 rule that we hear so often, which is that, 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers, or 80% of, your users come from 20% of participants. So talk to me about this. Talk to me about, where you got this advice. Did you ever actually follow it, and did it not turn out well? And what ultimately made you decide that this was bad advice?
Yeah, so this was very much advice I was getting at the very beginning of my community career. I'm not sure why, but if you go back to like the early 2010s, there was this whole notion that lurkers are evil, lurkers are bad, lurkers should be eliminated from your community and all this stuff. And I was very confused by it. And I mean, I initially was kind of like, okay, I'll do what I think I'm being told to do based off of advice on the internet, because everything on the internet must be true. And I really did pay attention to my engaged users, my active users for a little while. And the reality is that I'm a data nerd. And when I started looking at it from kind of a statistical perspective, and you go, wow, I have millions of lurkers and I have thousands of logged in users. Am I paying attention to the right group of people? And that was when I started realizing that I probably wasn't. And I was letting a very small group of people dictate what I was doing in community, which that didn't make any sense. So I started changing that behavior fairly quickly. I remember getting a lot of pushback, from peers, from colleagues, from leadership chains, kind of being like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Why are you paying attention to those people?" But I'm happy that I did because now, so many more years later in my career, I do what my lurkers want me to do. They define my SEO strategy. They define the architecture of my community, and everything like that. I mean, it's completely redefined everything, and it's been funny too because I've seen the industry shift as well. I haven't heard someone say the 80-20 rule or the 99-1 rule in a very long time now, and I'm grateful for it because it did need to go away.
So give me an example of what that looks like. Give me an example of a situation where if you listen to your active participants, the ones who are more vocal in the community, you might go this direction. But if you listen to the lurkers, and we need to talk about how you listen to the lurkers because they are quiet, they're lurking,
Yeah.
you would go in a different direction.
Yeah. So, for instance, for a support community, your active and engaged folks are going to be in the community posting new questions. They're going to be engaging with conversations. They could be engaging in water cooler talk. They tend to be more passionate, more positive, or more kind of like usually on one end of the emotional spectrum or the other. They're either very angry or they're very happy. And so if you assume that your active members are pretty much representative of every single need of your community, you could very feasibly focus your entire content strategy on things that need engagement. So, tell us about a time or ask me anything, basically things that need people to jump in there and actually say something in order to work. Or you might be in a situation where you say, okay, well, my engaged members are logged in, and therefore I can put everything behind a privacy wall. And therefore, no one can see anything unless they're logged in. Those are two strategies that absolutely can backfire if you're only looking at that specific group. Whereas lurkers for a support community are incredibly important. And I would actually argue they end up being the loudest majority from a quantitative perspective, because when you look at it, you see so much more data on what they're looking for. You can see what they're searching for. You can see how long they're looking at pages. And there's so many more of them. So you start really seeing these amazing trends and you start understanding a lot more. What's also interesting is that a lot of times your active or engaged users tend to be a very specific subset. They are people that tend to be very familiar with your product. They tend to be potentially experts in your product. They don't represent the much larger group that's saying, actually, I don't understand how to use this, or I'm just getting started, or maybe I'm quietly struggling in the background and I don't feel confident enough to actually say something. But by using data, we can understand who those people are and what to do about them. So it's very interesting. You do have to pay attention to both groups. But if you were to completely ignore that much larger, quiet group, you end up missing out on so much important information.
I see so many analogies to this to other places. My background, I used to work in radio. And when we were running
Mm.
radio stations, we would describe our listeners as P1s, which were the hardcore, what you're calling the active and
Yep.
engaged, and the P2s, which were the lurkers, essentially. And if you pay too
Yeah.
much attention, I ran alternative rock stations. If you pay too much attention to the hardcore fans, those are the ones that are out there on the cool new indie band, Death Cab for Cutie, or whatever it might be.
Yep.
Whereas, your lurkers are the ones who are sitting there going, we like Nickelback. It is what it is. And you kind of have to find the balance between the two. You even see it in politics where, you have the loud partisans at the center of the party. But then there's kind of this sort of silent majority, which is what lurkers are. And you have to be careful about the balance between the two. So it's so interesting. Are the data points that you're looking at different for your active users and your lurkers? Or are you
Yeah,
measuring them by the same
absolutely.
data points?
Well, you should measure your entire community at a high level from all the same data. Basically, you are looking at audience consumption and engagement. So as a whole, when I look at Calendly community every month, I am looking at page views, I am looking at unique visitors, I am looking at logged in users, I'm looking at number of posts, number of replies, time to reply, answer rate. I look at that from a very holistic perspective and I say, okay, great, I understand that. But then I also do look at it again and say, okay, what are the individuals who are not logged in doing? What are they looking at? Why are they probably not logging in? And then I also look at the logged in users, the ones that are engaging, and I'm going, okay, what are they engaging with? What is the content that they're posting on? And trying to understand, is it a similar behavior? Therefore, it's actually the same individuals, maybe just exhibiting different behaviors. Or am I looking at two very different personas? I'll say that in Calendly community, it tends to be the same persona, which is actually interesting. It just tends to be that there's certain barriers where my lurkers will cross over and become engaged because they can't find what they're looking for, but they feel welcome and able to ask a question. Or maybe there's a piece of feedback that they really think that we should have. So they do come out of the shadows and they actually post that feedback. Whereas, for instance, on like Autodesk community, that was very different. My engaged users were experts. They were people who were incredibly passionate about it. They were super users. Whereas my lurkers were the folks that, frankly, were just like, I'm just trying to get my job done. I'm not incredibly passionate about, the product. It's just part of the work that I do. And so kind of understanding those two different groups and making sure that my strategy addressed both of those was really important.
Yeah. Perhaps I should have asked this at the outset. Do you have a specific definition for what is a lurker? And is it your goal to try and turn lurkers into engaged users, or are you okay with them just being lurkers and they stay lurkers and that is what it is?
Yeah. So a lurker in my scenario is someone who visits your community, but doesn't log in and therefore also doesn't actually engage with the content. They're not liking it. They're not posting new content. They're not replying to content. So they're truly someone who kind of is just a fly on the wall. They do a drive by, all of that good stuff. Um, as far as am I trying to convert them? No, actually, I'm not. The only type of conversion that I'm looking to do is basically say, we're here. And if you do need something from us, the barrier to entry in this community is so freaking low. Come on in, ask a question. You're welcome. There's no such thing as a dumb question and everything like that. Um, that's about the only conversion I'm trying to do. There would definitely be communities out there where I would have a different tactic, people that I would say, no, like we really do want you to share. I mean, to kind of give you an example, so like for instance, I've been part of some photography communities. That's when we're like, we really do want people to swing in and just share a pretty picture of a sunset. Like, we love that for you. We don't want you to be a lurker. We do want you to contribute to the community. Um, but it's okay if people just want to kind of hang out and observe, and maybe they just don't want to engage. I don't think it's a bad thing to be a lurker. I mean, I am a lurker in so many communities, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that.
Yeah, I think I probably am too. You talked earlier about the communication between you and the other stakeholders in your organization. Is this something that you had to convince them of? And uh, did they think that only the members mattered, or have you been able to demonstrate the value of lurkers to them? And how so? Is it different depending on which department of the organization you are interacting with?
Yeah, it's funny. So as I've gone through my career, this conversation has gotten easier. And it's not because the leadership has changed their perspective. It's because I'm more confident in what I'm saying. So I will say, like right now, for instance, it was a very easy conversation to be like, nope, we're not paying attention to that. Membership is not a number that we're doing here. Very, very quickly was able to get my org on board with effectively, um, you know, audience numbers, consumption numbers, self-serve ratios. But that's also because we run a support community. We run a knowledge community. And so it's very easy for me to say, actually, if someone comes in and finds the answer that they're looking for and they don't have to engage with us, that is a win for us. It means no added cost. It's basically almost like a freebie. And that's effectively what the self-serve ratio is, the number of unique people coming in that are using your community versus the number of unique people who are submitting support tickets. You always want the number of self-serve to be higher than the number of one-on-one. And so that was a pretty easy sell. Earlier in my career, yeah, that was definitely a harder conversation to go through because you're getting told, no, 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 membership is important. And I think it's because a lot of companies equate membership to customer base. Like they're thinking, well, a person who just looks at us is not a customer, but a person who buys from us is a customer. And I think they're trying to put the same business ideals on membership, and it's just not the same. Like you don't need to be a customer of community in order to derive value from it.
If I'm hearing you right, it sounds like some of the way that you think about lurkers is specific to support communities, and that if you are running another type of community, for example, a community of practice where everybody is trying to do, something, you might think about lurkers differently.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, for instance, so like one of my peers, she runs a community of practice at a completely different company than me. But hers is very focused on people coming in and sharing very in-depth thoughts. And hers is also interesting because when you have a community practice, now you're not looking for those big numbers. So we're not looking for 100,000 unique visitors every month and 70% of them participating. Hers is more around kind of like, I have 500 people and I really need 400 of them every month to be engaging in that specific community. And so that's where it kind of changes, where you have to know what type of community you have. I think that's probably one of the most important things for new community managers is you need to define what your community is, and don't say, well, we do everything. You have to pick like one or two things, really lean into it, be really good at it. And make sure that you know how to talk about it. It's important. Like when I jump on a leadership call here, and I do talk about Calendly community, I say it is a community of support and knowledge. And it's important that I say that because, no one's ever going to look at our help center and be like, well, why aren't people logging in? It's like, because you don't log into a help center. You don't log into a knowledge base. So making sure that you define your community correctly is going to help you set the right goals and the right objectives around lurkers.
Yeah. Let me ask about another dimension that might approach or influence how you approach lurkers, and that is whether you are running a paid community or a free community. Would that impact how you would approach or think about lurkers?
Yes, probably. The only reason I say I kind of like pause on this one is that it depends again on what the purpose of that paid community is. So to kind of give you an example here, let's say for instance, okay, I'll give this example. So I am currently starting to work on some wine certifications. Just have decided that's going to be my act two in my retirement years. And there are actually a lot of paid communities out there that have something to do with wine. They might be the communities that are actually associated with the certifications. There is so much knowledge locked behind those paywalls. I'm not sure when I'm on that other side if I'm actually going to be engaging a lot in the first few months or even that first year. I think I might be doing a lot more learning than I actually am doing conversing. And so that might be a situation where someone does look and says, okay, she's new to this community. She's still in her learning phase. Eventually, she will be in her engaging phase and then her advocacy phase. So it's a mix. I think that there are definitely some paid communities where you're not going to drive value as a member unless you are engaging. And then there are some paid communities where you may be more in a learning and observing and kind of like osmosis phase. And that's how you derive value as a lurker before you get more comfortable and then start actually deriving value from engaging.
Yeah. So this depends in part upon where you are in the community journey, I suppose. I sometimes think of martial arts classes here in the U.S. where,
Yeah.
in the beginning you're just learning, and then as you get a couple belts under you and you get better, then you are teaching the younger members of the group, and so
Right.
I think that's kind of what you're talking about, where you become a lurker, and then once you become more experienced within the community, you take on a more
Yep.
active role. Yeah, that
Yep.
makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
I want to return to one thing that you said earlier. You mentioned personas. First of all, explain what those are, and can you tell me a little bit about how you use them at Calendly?
Yeah, so personas are really interesting. I think they definitely came more from the marketing side of the business world, also kind of like the user insights side of the world. Um, Depending on what company you're at is how they're defined. I have been at companies where they've had personas where they're like, yes, persona A is a 36-year-old woman, mother of three, likes her KitchenAid and does her taxes on her own, very specific weird things like that. And then you have other companies where a persona could be a solopreneur, someone who runs their own small business, either works by themselves or maybe one or two employees. We use more of that second group here at Calendly. Um, it's important to kind of understand these because sometimes you start also having to build up your content strategy around them. And you also have to think about how they impact user behavior. So, for instance, if I'm dealing with a solopreneur versus a salesperson that's part of a 1,000-person org, the way that they behave is going to be very different. My solopreneur is going to be very much focused on doing all of their own troubleshooting. They have to do their own tech support. They have to do their own permissions on their computer and their own malware and everything like that. Whereas someone who's at a large enterprise is now going to be dealing with, permissions coming down from IT. They're going to be very focused on their specific role, not everybody else's role. And this is important because when you start thinking about how that person engages with your community, how much time they have on your community, what type of conversations they want to engage with, this really, really impacts things. Here at Calendly, we have both. So I actually need to kind of build up that for both of them. And this is important for lurkers too, because I have to think about, well, what type of information are they trying to find? And making sure that they have, there's content for both of those personas to kind of fly on the wall, get what they need from and bounce, but also content for them to engage with if necessary.
Yeah, so that's fascinating. All right, Jillian. This is the final question. This is something that I ask everybody that comes on. I want you to make a prediction. 5 years from now, what do you think we're going to be talking about in the community building space?
Oh gosh. I feel like a lot of people these days are talking about AI. I have a feeling in 5 years, we're going to be on the I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see a really funny AI crash where communities are going to start contracting because AI is answering everything. And then at some point, AI is going to run out of content. And all of a sudden, people are going to be like, oh my God, we need communities back. That was where we were getting all the information to feed the models. So I think about 5 years from now, we're going to be back at that point where we're going to start talking about trying to like build communities up again to feed the AI models. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation to have. Yeah, that's gonna be weird. It's gonna be a very weird conversation in 5 years.
This is something that hadn't occurred to me till you just brought it up. What is the impact of AI going to be on support communities? And is that going to be different, do you think, than what it's going to be on, for example, communities of practice like we've talked about?
I think communities of practice are going to be very insulated against the impact of AI. Support communities, we're already seeing the impact. I mean, like to give you an example, I kind of alluded to this at one point. We're talking about metrics. We are actually seeing our direct traffic is starting to trend down when we look at month over month, even though we should still be growing pretty substantially. Like, we have historical knowledge there. We're not seeing it anymore. And it's because we've lost so much traffic to Google AI overviews popping up at the top of your search, and basically making it so that there's this beautifully curated bunch of knowledge. So you don't even need to click into a link anymore. I mean, you can type in something like how to fix Calendly availability. It pops up, it tells you everything you need to know. The problem is that if you look at the sources for all of that information, it's us. It's support communities. And at some point, we're going to stop getting questions in support communities to the range that we have been getting them, start seeing support communities go away because AI can answer everything. But the problem is that the information has to come from somewhere. So it's this very weird chicken egg weird situation.
Yeah, that gets a little odd.
It's already odd.
So let me ask you this then, just to bring it full circle. Does AI change the equation in how you value active versus lurking members of your community?
No, not really. I think lurkers are just I think a lot of lurkers are starting to use more AI now. I mean, the reality is that a lurker was already someone who went to Google, typed in a question, found our community, clicked on the link, and went, cool, that helps, thank you. Now the lurkers just go to Google, they type in their question like they always have, they see a beautifully curated thing at the top, and they go, cool, thank you. It's the same behavior. I think the folks that we're going to engage anyways. I think what's moderately terrifying is that I think places for active and engaged users to engage are going to start going away. And I think that's going to be weird for people. I don't think people realize how much decentralized knowledge is about to become a thing. Like, I think Reddit is going to get a lot busier because people are going to be like, I want to talk about this product and I can't find the place to have a conversation about it. So they're going to start going somewhere that isn't on the company's domain.
All right. That's fascinating. We'll find out. We'll see what happens in the next couple of years. Jillian Bejtlich, thank you so much for this conversation. First of all, I don't think I've ever said lurker so many times in such a short time. The word is starting to lose all meaning. But this has been a fascinating exploration. I really appreciate it. You are the senior community manager at Calendly. Look, the thing I can say about Calendly is I am a very happy customer. I've been using it for years, and it is made my life easier. So I don't know what else there is to say, but I appreciate you taking the time to share your wisdom with us.
Yeah, no problem. And I'm sure Calendly is very happy to know that you are a happy customer. I'm thrilled to hear that. I'm going to go tell my marketing team and be like, hey, so
I will confess, I'm just a lurker in the community. I am not an active member.
that is, I like you
okay.
anyways. So good. It's okay.
Well, thank you, Jillian. I really appreciate it.